So in today's video, I'm going to be going over some films that help explain the Afghan war. I'm going to be starting from the Russian period of occupation right up to the end of the Americans. Company, I've talked about this film before in my video where I discussed films that explain the war on terror, but this film is a very good film that explains the origins of the Afghan war. Obviously, the beginning of the problems in Afghanistan started when the Russians invaded, I believe in 1979. They tried to prop up the communist regime in Afghanistan after the coup of the king, I believe. If that's correct, if not, don't worry, try and correct me then. Yeah, this film is really good at showing how the Russians struggled in Afghanistan. When they were in Afghanistan, they were battling the Mujahideen, which later split between the Mujahideen and it became the Northern Alliance and the Taliban. They had a civil war. Obviously, the Taliban triumphed. So this film is a really good film in explaining the origins of the Russian stage in Afghanistan. And I believe if you want to watch this film, I'm not sure, it's not on Netflix, so you're gonna have to like order the DVD or try and find it online somehow. Right, so the next film I will recommend is this one, The Covenant. Now, The Covenant is about a guy who has this relationship with a friendship with a Afghan interpreter. His unit go and try and raid an IED factory. The mission goes wrong, and him and his interpreter are basically on a run for their survival, and he eventually ends up making it, but his interpreter is obviously stuck. There's a bounty in his head. He goes back to Afghanistan and whatever. But this film does help explain help explain the problems in Afghanistan with the war. It also explains the problems that interpreters and people, the Afghans who worked with the coalition forces, the problems they have. Obviously, they face a lot of backlash, especially after the withdrawal. I believe in 2021, a lot of people who worked with US forces were hunted by the Taliban, and because the Americans or the British or the coalition forces in general just didn't pick them up. So this film actually highlights a bit of that, I guess, in a lesser sense, and yeah, it's a good film to watch on the Afghan war. I believe I've recommended this film before, but I'll recommend it again. Whiskey Tango FoxTR is a great film on the Afghan war. It's from a journalist perspective, which I find refreshing. Most films in Afghanistan is about a soldier, you know what I mean? And it's good to see things through the lens of a journalist, because they're more connected, they're less partial, they're less, attached to one side, should I say. And basically, she's trying to cover the war in Afghanistan, and you get to understand a bit about the conflict by watching this film. I highly recommend it. It's got some comedy aspects to it. It's got some romance in it, but overall, I think you'll learn a bit too about the war if you watch this film. Right, so the next film I recommend is this one here, 12 Strong. 12 Strong mainly just follows the initial the initial invasion of Afghanistan by US forces right after 9/11. It's a good film to watch. It does explain some of the problems that occur in Afghanistan, and you will gain an understanding of the conflict a little bit more if you watch this film. I'll highly recommend it, and it's got good actors in it as well. So the last film I'll recommend is this one here, Kite Runner. Now, I watched this film a long time ago, so the plot escapes me. I do remember bits and pieces from it, but I also read the book, and the book is also good. And this film is good because it shows the war from like a civilian perspective, from just an ordinary Afghan person's perspective. One criticism I give a lot of the war and film and shows on Afghanistan, the Afghan war, they fail to show the ordinary person's perspective. Like, there's a lot of explosions and shooting, but you never see how it just affects a regular person really. And I feel like in the war on terror, there's a lack of perspective on both sides. It's always the Americans, it's always all the Russians, it's always the other person's side. We never really see the Afghan person's side. So this is actually a good film to watch. Also, I recommend reading the book Kite Runner, and there's also a book called The Mountain and the Mountain Echoes. I recommend reading that as well. Alright, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. If you didn't, don't worry about it. If you actually end up watching the films I recommend and you actually enjoy them, please come back and leave a comment. Just say, "Oh, I watched the film that you recommended," and you could even leave your thoughts on the film that I recommended. Thank you for watching the video and have a nice day.